Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we are unpacking a piece of history that honestly completely redefines the boundaries of government secrecy. We're looking at Project MKUltra. It's the chilling, almost unbelievable true story of what is widely considered the CIA's darkest secret. So, let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. I really want you to let the weight of this fundamental question sink in for a second. What if an intelligence agency secretly experimented on human minds? Usually, when we think of intelligence agencies, we're thinking about espionage, right? Code breaking, gathering intel on foreign adversaries, that sort of thing. We absolutely do not think of them turning their massive resources inward to manipulate the fundamental cognitive functions of human beings. But, as we're about to see, this wasn't just some theoretical debate happening in a dusty briefing room.
Now, I want to make this crystal clear right up front. What we are discussing today is not science fiction. It's definitely not a script for some Hollywood thriller. This is a shockingly real, documented true story. Every single thing we're going to unpack in this explainer, the experiments, the drugs, the massive cover-ups, actually happened to real citizens. You know, it's so easy to detach ourselves from history when it sounds like a movie plot, but keeping ourselves grounded in the reality of these events is absolutely crucial for understanding the true gravity of Project MKUltra. So, to understand how this even happened, we've got to transport ourselves back to 1953. We are literally at the height of the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union are locked in this intense, high-stakes global struggle for power and intelligence supremacy. And fear wasn't just present, fear was everywhere. American officials were gripped by this deep, urgent anxiety that enemy nations had actually figured out functional ways to control human thoughts and behavior. They really believed they were falling behind in a psychological arms race. The CIA felt they desperately needed answers, and they needed them yesterday. And so, born out of that profound paranoia, they launched the highly classified program known as MKUltra.
Their mission was terrifyingly simple: find a way to control the human mind. The agency wasn't just looking for, say, better interrogation tactics or slicker ways to detect lies. No, they were explicitly looking to seize control of the human mind itself. When you strip away all the dense bureaucratic language and the complex intelligence jargon, this was their grave, ultimate objective. They wanted the power to manipulate behavior at the most fundamental, cellular level.
To actually execute this terrifying mission, the CIA brought in a chemist named Sidney Gottlieb. And under his direction, this evolved into a massive covert operation, spawning hundreds of experiments across both the United States and Canada. This was not just some isolated rogue operation confined to a single secure laboratory in Washington, D.C. It was a sprawling, massive initiative that crossed international borders. The sheer geographic scale alone tells us just how committed the agency was to proving their mind control theories.
Now, what's really interesting, and honestly deeply unsettling about this, is where these experiments actually took place. They didn't just happen in hidden underground bunkers. The CIA utilized trusted pillars of society. We're talking universities, hospitals, research centers, and prisons. Unaware patients, students, and inmates suddenly found themselves caught up in a hidden network of testing. People who went to these institutions for healing, education, or rehabilitation often became participants without ever knowing they were being experimented on. It was a profound, staggering betrayal of public trust that turned everyday safe havens into covert laboratories. As this massive testing network expanded, researchers turned to an incredibly powerful new chemical tool, LSD. They were just deeply curious to see if this potent psychedelic could be used to alter memories, to fundamentally influence a person's behavior, or even to force subjects to reveal their most deeply held secrets against their will. And the absolute most shocking part of all of this? Many subjects were given these powerful, mind-altering drugs completely without their knowledge. They were simply dosed in secret and then closely monitored just to see how the mind would break or bend. But you know, the experimentation did not stop at chemical manipulation. The CIA's toolkit was incredibly varied and deeply disturbing. If drugs weren't enough, they'd utilize extreme psychological stress. They employed intense sensory deprivation, literally locking individuals away from any external light or sound just to see how the human mind reacts when placed in a total void. They also heavily experimented with hypnosis and various other forms of severe manipulation. The goal was always exactly the same: find the exact breaking point of human cognition and figure out how to take the steering wheel.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real tragedy of the situation, because we absolutely cannot look at these methods without looking at the devastating human cost. For the unaware participants, the results were just absolutely tragic. We are talking about severe mental trauma, long-lasting psychological damage, profound memory loss, gripping paranoia, severe anxiety, and total emotional breakdowns. These weren't just temporary side effects either. For many, the damage inflicted by these covert tests was entirely permanent, completely altering the course of their lives forever.
Now, despite the sprawling network of hospitals and universities, and despite hundreds of experiments leaving a massive trail of shattered lives in their wake, the program remained completely hidden from the public for years. I mean, just think about the incredible level of coordination and strict secrecy required to keep an operation of this magnitude completely in the dark. The government successfully maintained a veil of total silence over MKUltra, keeping the very citizens they were sworn to protect entirely unaware of the invisible danger operating right in their own backyards.
But as we know, secrets of this magnitude rarely stay buried forever. Flash forward to the 1970s, and suddenly the entire narrative rapidly shifts. Everything begins to unravel. And it wasn't the agencies stepping up and volunteering this information, oh no. It was the relentless, dogged work of investigative journalists and the formation of serious government committees that finally began to pull back the curtain. They dug through the whispers, they followed the obscure paper trails, and they systematically exposed the sheer existence of MKUltra to the light of day.
When the news finally broke, the public was left completely stunned, grappling with one massive lingering question. How could a government agency secretly conduct experiments on its own citizens? I want you to pause and really think about the paradigm shift this caused. This wasn't just your standard political scandal. This was a fundamental earthquake in the relationship between the government and the people. The absolute revelation that the agency had violated the bodies and minds of the very people it was supposed to defend created this massive shockwave of mistrust, a shockwave that, honestly, still echoes in our culture today.
And as if the experiments themselves weren't shocking enough, the controversy grew exponentially larger when the truth of the massive cover-up was exposed. Because as those investigations really heated up, thousands upon thousands of MKUltra records simply vanished. But they weren't just misplaced or lost, they were deliberately destroyed by the agency. The very people who ran the program systematically purged their own archives to hide their tracks. And because of this massive destruction of evidence, a dense fog was rolled right over the truth, ensuring that the full, unvarnished extent of what happened in those dark rooms would remain obscured forever.
So the crucial point here is this. Even after that deliberate destruction of thousands of documents, the fragmented records that somehow survived the purge revealed something totally astonishing. Those surviving papers alone connected the CIA to more than 150 separate research projects under the MKUltra umbrella. And remember, that is just what was left over after they literally tried to burn the evidence. Experts who study this history are in wide agreement that the real number of projects, and of course the real number of victims, was likely exponentially higher than 150.
Today, decades after the fact, the legacy of MKUltra remains intensely controversial. On one hand, some view it as a desperate Cold War experiment, a misguided but deeply fearful reaction to the very real threat of Soviet expansion and psychological warfare. On the other hand, others view it strictly as one of the greatest, most severe violations of human rights ever committed by a government agency against its own people. Regardless of which lens you view it through, the objective reality of what occurred remains a deeply chilling chapter in modern intelligence operations.
Now, while the CIA eventually had to step forward and publicly admit that the program existed, the deliberate destruction of those documents leaves us essentially staring at a massive wall of unanswered questions. Exactly how many people were affected by this? Just how far did these mind control experiments truly go? And perhaps the most unsettling question of all, were all of these programs actually truly shut down, or did they simply evolve into something else under a different codename? The complete truth may never be fully known, leaving permanent, unresolved gaps in our historical record.
But one thing is absolutely certain. Project MKUltra proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that reality can sometimes be far, far more frightening than fiction. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. Was MKUltra simply a Cold War mistake born out of extreme fear, or is there more to the story than we've been told? I really want you to reflect on everything we've unpacked in this explainer today. Drop your thoughts down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more mysteries, secrets, and incredible untold stories from history.